Chapter 6, Public Opinion and Political Action. Already, here we go. So, public opinion deals with trying to figure out exactly what the people are thinking, what their preferences are, what policy they wish the government would pursue. And in order to do that, you have to understand who the American people are. One of the dynamics that has changed and changed recently within the United States is just the composition of the United States. So today, the United States is one of the most diverse countries in the world. And it was founded on this principle, really, of diversity. It was a vast continent. Many different groups came over and colonized it. They came over seeking their own personal freedoms, whether that was religious or political, and it grew up with diversity, and they tolerated. I don't like the word tolerated. It kind of suggests that we don't really like this, but we're going to let you do it anyway. Today, people often use the term celebrate diversity. That's perhaps a better term. But there's got to be some continuity as well. At any rate, public opinion aims to understand the distribution of the population's belief about politics and public policy. The way that it does that is through demography or demographers or the individuals that do that. This is the science of human populations, its components, how it changes, what people are thinking, etc. Now, the way demographers help to do this or know what the population actually is at any given moment in time, and there is a lag. There's a lag here, is through the American census. The census is required by the Constitution because the House of Representatives, as you know, is required. Is based on population. And so the Constitution, when they created the House of Representatives, said, well, we've got to count the population. They determined that they would count it every 10 years for the purposes of representation in the House of Representatives. So because of that, this has aided demographers in their study of American political culture and just what it is that the American people are thinking. John F. Kennedy, a president of the United States, as I'm sure you all know, he said, America is not merely a nation, but a nation of nations. And what he meant by that, there were people here from most parts of the world. We became a nation of immigrants, so much so that the Statue of Liberty was given to us by France, and if you look at what the Statue of Liberty says, a portion of that inscription says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse by your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." And this was really the view of immigration through much of the United States. We wanted individuals to come. We have this vast continent to populate and to tame, and we needed those. And France saw what we were doing and honored us by giving the Statue of Liberty to us for what we were doing for the world. Now, things have changed since then. We are no longer this unpopulated vast continent, though if you drive across the United States, what you will find is that there are many portions of the United States where there is just nothing there. But nevertheless, those are regions where it's dry, there's not forest, and so there's problems with that too. Okay, so nevertheless, today what has happened with federal immigration is that federal law allows for about 1 million new immigrants a year. In addition to that, about 500,000 immigrants come illegally each year. Now, this is to say nothing of what's happened with Biden opening the doors, and we'll talk about more about that in a few minutes. So this most recent wave of immigration began in the 1960s, which has been dominated by Hispanics. Today, Hispanics are the largest minority in the United States, passing up African Americans. Oh, I don't know. I can't remember. It was about 10 or 15 years ago that they became the largest minority group in the United States. All right. So here, a little bit of the history of this immigration. So for the first century, we had an open door policy. Anyone who wanted to come could come. Then finally, so we declare our independence in 1776. So you can see here, 100 years, 1875, first restrictions actually come. And they're good restrictions. We don't want criminals. We don't want prostitutes. Eventually, they'd say no lunatics either. We don't want disease. You can see even the disease component. What did Trump do with the pandemic? He shut down the doors of the country. Any individual traveling in from China was not allowed. We don't want the disease. So this is not new. 1882, the first geographically based distinctions were put into place, or restrictions, with the Chinese Exclusion Act. Not that we've always been down on the Chinese, not at all. But in 1924, concern grew about the flood of immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe. And so Congress, now why is concern growing? You need assimilation into the country. You want individuals to come into the country and embrace the values and the norms that, quote, have been in the country for so long, that have helped make the country what it is. So when there was lots of Southern and Eastern immigration, Congress passed the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act, which established immigration quotas based on national origin. So the more they want individuals coming in who have already come in, so to speak, because their predecessors have assimilated. So the more people that had already come from a country, or they're already living in the United States, based on the 1890 census, that's where those quotas came from. And so that meant that most new immigrants would come from northwestern European countries. So England, France, Belgium, Norway. So you're gonna get those countries that already have people here. That's where more immigration was allowed from, because of this idea of assimilation. It was until 1965 that these quotas from the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act were actually abolished. So now we just don't get the immigration from European countries that we once did. And so finally in 1965, Congress abolished it. So the Hart-Celler Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, which replaced the previous Johnson-Reed Immigration Act and quotas, comes into play in 1965. And the goal of it was family unification, really became the prevailing goal of U.S. immigration policy. Now, today, many politicians and many Americans believe, because of the competitiveness of the world economy, it would be better, our immigration policy would be better served by reducing this emphasis on family unification. So in other words, if individuals have come in, what is this idea of family unification? If individuals have come in as a husband or a wife, and their spouse is in another country, that was the goal before, get that family unified. But today, many are arguing family unification shouldn't be our immigration policy. Instead, it should it should allocate a substantial percentage of immigration visas to people who have special talents. For instance, if somebody's coming over from Europe or wherever else, and they are a nurse or a doctor, it is much more likely that they'll receive a visa to come in because that is a skill that is needed. So these individuals would like to revise the Hart-Celler Immigration Nationality Act and make that special talents the emphasis instead of family reunification. So there are some difficult questions with respect to immigration policy. Number one, as we mentioned and I state down here, Biden has really opened the doors to the United States, and there has been a flood of immigrants since he has become president of the United States. The figures vary: 9 million in 3 years, 3 million a year, doubling what there was there before. Most of that immigration illegal. And so the question becomes, how do we stem the tide of illegal immigration? Who is coming in? Are there terrorists coming in? Are there undesirables coming in, meaning gang members, et cetera, et cetera? So we can't overwhelm the system with new immigration. We need individuals who immigrate into the country to assimilate to the quote values of the United States of America. And so you can't overwhelm the system. The last significant reform of immigration came from the Simpson-Mazzoli Act. That law required that employers document the citizenship of their employees. I remember this. I was about 24. And I remember this: when you got a job, you had to prove that you're a citizen. And today it's still that way. And this is why. The problem was, and so the idea was, if immigrants, illegal immigrants, couldn't document that they were here legally, they wouldn't be able to get a job, and therefore there would be no reason for them to come, because that's why they're coming, for a better life. But the problem with the Simpson-Mazzoli Act and this requirement that employers document the citizenship of their employees, it's difficult to prove. And if an employer hires somebody based on forged documents, and so the employer has an out if they hire somebody who ends up being quote illegal, because they can always claim that they were given documents and they thought that they were real. Okay. Some more difficult questions, very difficult questions. What do you do with the children who have grown up in the United States who were brought here illegally? These are, as I'm sure many of you know, dreamers. Maybe some of you are dreamers. We feel your plight. So advocates have attempted to get Congress to pass the DREAM Act. This would have offered permanent residence to the individuals who arrived illegally as children. And what do you do? These are individuals who really have no country. If they're not legal in the United States, they were not born in their country of origin. It doesn't even feel like their country to them because they can't even remember living there in most instances. But this legislation, the Dreamers legislation, stalled. And so Obama, what he did was he created the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, by executive order. Now, you may think, okay, great solution. The problem is, this is legislation. And so the Republicans are criticizing Obama for this because you're saying, wait a second, it's the legislature's job to pass legislation. By executive order, you just created legislation. So they criticized him, arguing that he exceeded his presidential authority. But then nobody's really done anything about it until Trump comes along. And Trump says, no, this again exceeded executive authority. So he ended the DACA program in 2018 and called for Congress to deal with the issue once and for all. The problem is now there's more illegal immigration coming in than ever before. Trump's proposal was that this, of course, when he was president, was to build the wall. Biden comes in, not only stops building the wall, in some instances took some of it down. So there you have it. Tough questions. This is all going to come into play on what America thinks, because it's changing the composition of America. Okay, the American melting pot. So this is this idea of assimilation. The United States, you had all these different cultures, all these different ideas, and the idea of a melting pot. A melting pot is when you put a bunch of different metals into a cauldron, you heat it up, and they melt and mix together, and it creates a new substance. This is the idea of the American melting pot, that all these different cultures have come, we've mixed together, and we've created a new political substance. But what do you do now that the composition of America is changing so much, and what are you going to do? How is it going to change? How is it going to change the composition of America? Will it be beneficial? Will there be time to assimilate? These are the questions. So America is in this third wave of immigration, and policy makers and demographers are talking about a new minority majority. And what they mean by that was that the non-Hispanic white majority is eventually going to end. And it's going to represent less than half of the population by 2050. So right now in 2015, this was the population percent of the United States. When I say right now, this was 9 years ago. So white Americans made up 62% of the population, Hispanics 18% of the population, African Americans 12%, Asian Americans 6%, and Native Americans 1%. So you can see here, now it was about 15 years ago or so, that maybe it was 20, that Hispanics had just passed African Americans as the largest minority group in the United States. And now they're up by 6%. So the projection is that the Hispanic population will continue to grow, and the white population is decreasing. Now, why is the population decreasing? White population decreasing? It's decreasing relative to the Hispanic population, but whites are just not having as many kids as they used to have. There's been a lot of Hispanic immigration, which has bumped up. And so you can see here, this is the trajectory of the coming minority, white minority. What they mean by that is they don't have 50%. So whites clear into 2060 will still be the largest largest ethnic group in the United States, but they will not have a majority. So you can see Hispanics are going to go up to about 30% by that same time, where whites will be 40%. So all groups will be minorities. How will this change the views, the outlooks of individuals in the United States? How will it change us politically? This is why it matters. So going back to the United States Census, remember what we said at the beginning of this. States get representation in the House of Representatives based on the population they have in a given state. And so these population changes are going to cause shifts in power as well. It's who gets voted into office. And this is going to be a major shift for politics in the United States. How will it end up? It'll be interesting to see how it changes the politics of the United States. And so this is, of course, one of the concerns. All right. So this assimilation comes about because it's a process of political socialization, which is really, for the most part, it is informal learning, more important than the things we learn in the classroom, so to speak, and we learn it organically. It's who we are. It's who we are as a people. It's who we are as a nation. You've ever heard of the phrase, somebody say, "Oh, that's un-American." In other words, really what they're getting at, there's something unique about being American. There are certain things we do as Americans, certain things we don't do. And when somebody says something like that, they're really tapping into that idea that there's something unique about America. And this comes to us based on our past, based on who we are now, based on the principles we hold dear. So this political socialization is a process by which an individual acquires their political attitudes, views, and values. And they come to this by agents of socialization. So here are the three dominant agents of socialization. There are others, but these are the ones we're going to look at. So the family. The family is dominant as a socialization agent because it has these early years. You're an infant. Everything you know, everything you understand comes to you because of your parents or whoever you're living with, whether it's your grandparents or whatever. So you just have all this time with them, and you pick up on things as just conversations are going on. For instance, in my house one day, my dad came home from work. He sat on the couch and was reading the newspaper as he was watching the news. My mom was fixing the dinner, and there was a newscast came on about Ted Bundy, who had raped and killed women. And my dad said, "Boy, they ought to hang that guy." And what happened from that is I learned, just from that one statement, I learned that capital punishment is an acceptable punishment for the worst types of crimes. And I was probably 6 or 7 at the time. This is what I mean by just everything your family does has this socialization effect on you. Furthermore, there's an emotional commitment from the family. They love you, they care for you, they sacrifice for you. And so you tend to think what they do is the appropriate way to approach things. However, the mass media has been called the new parent. Why has it been called the new parent? Well, in one sense, if any of you've seen this happening, the TV, the iPad, the iPhone, really replacing parents in a lot of ways just with the amount of time a kid spends with it. Nevertheless, it's this source of information as children get older that displaces their parents to a degree. It's not that the kid is just going to reject everything he learned here in the mass media with what he was taught, even happenstance-wise here, but it just begins to challenge, or may begin to challenge if he or she is hearing things that are at odds. All right. So as you get older, you're going to get more and more of that. Now, youth, by and large, don't watch politics, but just again, what they hear is going to influence what they think. Now, if you've ever wondered why advertisements are targeting older Americans, particularly on the news, this is why. Most individuals who watch the news, so CNN, median age of viewers, the middle age, 60, MSNBC, 65, and Fox News, 66. Individuals who watch the news just tend to be older. And so that is why on those advertisements on those platforms or broadcasters are going to have advertisements that are more in line with what an older individual would need. Schooling may weaken the family's influence. Particularly, schooling tends to have a liberalizing influence on kids. So if you ever wonder why youth tend to be more liberal, well, schooling tends to, not always, but tends to have that influence. There's also the promotion of a national identity and loyalty that comes from what we're taught in school. So it influences who we are and what we think. So how do we measure public opinion? The public opinion, as we said at the beginning, it seeks to understand what the population believes about politics and public policy. But because the United States is so diverse, it is difficult, and we put here in quotes, for the science of public opinion to measure that. It is a science, but it's also not an exact science. It's not like when you pour one chemical in with another chemical, you're going to get the same reaction every time. So it's science, quote, science and art that come into play in just what's going on and how things are measured. But on the other hand, pollsters have come a long way from when they originally started. But we'll get to that. Well, let's get to that now, and then we'll come back to this slide. So in 1936, this is a famous famous mishap. So in 1936, the Literary Digest took a poll, and it predicted that Alf Landon would become president with a vote of 55.4%. However, the result was Landon only received 38% and FDR won. So why was it so wrong? The reason it was wrong was it sent opinion cards to people who had subscriptions with a phone or car registration. That would have ignored those individuals who were struggling during the Great Depression. So not everybody had phones in 1936. And individuals who were poor, who had lost their jobs, they didn't. They couldn't afford one. Not everybody had a car in 1936. These would have been the poorer individuals. So it widely ignored those who were struggling during the Great Depression and focused instead on the more well-to-do. And this is why the result ended up so different. So this is what we mean by public opinion polls have come a long way. So now let's go back. So the modern public opinion polls, there are a number of steps that demographers have learned that you've got to take in order to build an accurate poll. So first of all, you have to identify the population. What are you studying? If you're studying how individuals in California think about Gascon, the LADA, then you're only going to ask people in LA County. If you're studying who thinks would be the better presidential candidate, you're going to look at the entire United States, etc. So you've got to look at what you're trying to study, and then you're going to make determinations based on that to identify your population. You've got to build a random and representative sample. So a random sample, coming over here, a random sample is a limited number of people from the overall population. If you're trying to determine what somebody thinks about something, what's going to be about the percent that believe, for instance, in capital punishment, there's no way to question the entire population of that group. So you've got to build a random sample that will reflect and give everybody an equal chance of being chosen. But it's also got to be representative. And by that, we mean a group whose demographic distribution is similar to that of the overall population. So in other words, if you're studying a question with respect to almost anything, and your population is 18% Hispanic, and the white population is 62, and the black population is 12, then in your sample, you've got to have about that percentage of those groups. You've also got to look at male versus female. That's what we mean by representative. So then you're going to determine the sample size. Now, obviously, the larger sample size, the more accurate it's going to be. But again, how many people do you ask? There becomes diminishing returns. So believe it or not, a sample of 1,000 to 1,500, as long as it's random and it's representative, will give you a fairly accurate result as to what the population thinks about something. Now, there is what is known as a margin of error with these things. So obviously you haven't questioned the entire population. What is the point of doing that? Because it'd be like taking a vote and you wouldn't be able to do that. It takes too much time and effort. So in that, the way the pollsters will state it, and this is where part of the science comes in, they'll say this poll is accurate with a plus or minus 3%. Meaning, let's say that the poll found that 52% of the people said that they're going to vote for Trump in the next election. Since it's accurate by plus or minus 3%, it means that Trump could have as high as 55, or he might have 49, because 52 minus 3 is 49. That's what they mean by this margin of error. All right? Okay, so now today, one of the things that's happening is people are, well, let me come back to that. So it's expensive to conduct these polls. It's expensive to send pollsters out and just randomly question people. So one of the things they've done is they've moved to telephone polls. They cost about 1/5 of the cost of an in-person poll. And so what they do to try and keep this random is they use random digit dialing. Seems reasonable, right? But there are some disadvantages to these polls. So a small percentage of the population does not have telephones. And so if you go back to this idea that everybody has an equal chance of being chosen, the problem with telephone polls is that's just not true. So that is going to increase your margin of error. There are also people who are substantially less willing to participate in a telephone poll than in person. I don't know about you, but if I don't recognize the answer half the time, if I don't recognize the phone number, half the time I won't answer. And usually when I do answer, I wish I hadn't, because it's some sales job going on. All right, so people are just not answering their phone, which is going to hurt the accuracy of that. Today, 52% of adults only have cell service, and that's even higher among young adults. Now, I am 62. 10 years ago, I just got rid of my landline. I thought, why am I paying for both? And so I think that number is even higher today. And so then the cell phone, that's going to bring up problems with respect that people are less willing to participate with the cell phone because many times we just simply don't answer our phone. All right. So what is the future of polling because of that? Pollstering groups like Gallup have gone to is they've gone to what is known as knowledge networks. And what they try to do is they try to assemble a representative sample of the population by first contacting them by phone, and then if they agree to participate, this is what they get for their agreement. They're given internet access, and they're paid a small sum each time they participate. So in a sense, you can almost argue that they're almost professional pollees. And that, I think, is problematic as well. If we're getting people who are taking polls just to get a little bit of money, can we really trust what they're saying? But this is the future. Right now, at least, that is the future of polling, is these knowledge networks. Now, why is it that politicians use public opinion polls? Politicians want to know what policies they can support that will resonate with voters. That's one of the things that's going on. But it also allows them to shape their message to win elections. So it's good that politicians want to know what the public preferences are and what policies they can support. But if we're using these polls to allow them to shape their message to win election, is this really what they want? Do they really want to support the public, or are they just hoodwinking us, pulling the wool over our eyes, to see what message will resonate with voters and then do what they want? Time will tell, but it seems to be that this is here to stay. All right. Now, critics of the use of public opinion polls. So this idea that we've just talked about here, you can tell I have some problem with this, and I'm not the only one. So public opinion, if we just want to, Newt Gingrich, he was the Republican Speaker of the House in 1994. Somebody asked him about public opinion, that some of his policies were going against public opinion. And his response was, if all we needed to do in government was take a public opinion poll, then we wouldn't even need Congress. All we'd need was a bureaucracy to take a public opinion poll, and then whatever the results were, to put it into effect. So he's arguing that public opinion shouldn't always hold politicians in the approaches they take. And that's a good argument. So Seward was the guy that purchased Alaska for the United States. And after he purchased it, people mocked him, and that purchase, they called it Seward's Folly. This was in 1866. The price was $72 million, which seems like nothing today, but it was a lot of money back then. Not a super ton of money, but it was still a lot of money. They just basically believed that he'd purchased the frozen wasteland. But today we see the wisdom in that purchase. And it was good that he had done that, despite the fact that public policy would have been against it if there had been a poll. We know that public policy would have been against it because this is what they thought after it happened. Okay, here's Winston Churchill, leader of Great Britain during World War II. Nothing is more dangerous than to live in the temperamental atmosphere of a Gallup poll, always taking one's pulse and taking one's temperature. There is only one duty, only one safe course, and that is to try to be right and not to fear to do or say what you believe. So this is Winston Churchill, and he has got problems with public opinion polls. So sometimes a politician just has to lead despite what the population may think. They've just got to, quote, do the right thing. Now, political ideology. So let's change course for a minute. Political ideology. So one of the things, in a sense, that public opinion polls measure is ideology, what we think. So what is political ideology? It is a coherent set of beliefs about politics, public policy, and public purpose. What should the government do? What policy should it pursue? Where should it just let the market decide and just stay out? Now, notice one of the interesting components of this definition of political ideology is it implies consistent, is a coherent set of beliefs. Okay, that implies consistent. Beliefs don't change. So the more consistent an individual is about his or her ideology, the more ideologically driven they are. Now, ideology does not automatically imply a particular party. Many Americans use the term conservative and liberal to describe themselves, not Democrat and Republican. Then a Gallup poll. Funny that we should talk about a Gallup poll. So again, polls are useful. They tell us stuff, but they don't tell us everything. So Americans in 2018, 35% of themselves labeled themselves conservative, 35% moderates, and 26% liberal. So that's where we are. Now, if you notice where party ID is concerned, Democrats are higher, Republicans are lower. So that means that you've really got some conservative moderates or conservative Democrats that come into play. All right, so what do these political ideologies, what do these political ideologies believe? So conservatives, this is what they want. They want to see the government do less. They want the private sector to be able to have more freedom and to make things work for the private sector. As we age, we tend to become more conservative and more supportive of traditional values. Now, as a group, as a demographer group, whites tend to be more conservative than other parts of the population. It's not that minorities can't be conservative, but whites as a group tend to be more. They also, religiously, Protestants are more likely to be conservative than other religions. So liberals, they want to see the government do more, including regulate the economy for the public interest. So, for instance, with the Obamacare, conservatives were against it, liberals were for it. They just wanting the government to do more. You're more likely to be liberal if you are younger, but ironically, you're less likely to vote. This is why the Democrats make a big deal of getting out the vote, because they know their voters tend to be younger, and they know that younger voters don't tend to vote as often. More supportive of abortion and gay rights. And who are these? Again, these are in general African Americans, Hispanic, and women. There is a gender gap. A gender gap is this idea that more women support the liberal cause than do men. And there's a gender gap on this side. More men support conservative causes than women. As far as religion is concerned, Jews and Catholics are more liberal than other religious denominations. Particularly Jews tend to be very, very liberal. This is why you have Biden so supportive of Israel, because he knows that there's about 6% of the population out there that he wants for them to support him and vote for him, because if they don't, it is far less likely that he would win. If you look at the difference in parties on a continuum, this is what you would get. So you have Democrats over here on the left, Republicans on the right. And you can see that Obama, according to the individual who created this chart, Obama is right about here. So a little left of center, but definitely on the liberal side. Bernie Sanders way over here. So when Trump complains that, that the Democrats have been taken over by the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and they're calling the shots, this is what he's talking about. Bernie Sanders may not have been elected president, but the policies that he wanted and the other progressives seem to be coming out. Trump, you can see over here on the right, very much a Tea Party kind of conservative, where he wants to return to some of these foundational principles of conservatism. Now, does it matter? Does it matter who you choose? And yes, it does matter who you choose. There is a difference in who you choose. So Republicans, check this out. Same-sex marriage. Republicans against, Democrats for. Gun control, Republicans against, Democrats for. Obamacare, Republicans against, Democrats for. And you can just go down the list. School prayer, Republicans for, Democrats against. So it does matter what you think and which political party you belong to. I've been taking for a number of years a ideology survey with some of my classes. It hasn't worked out this at Cerritos yet here, but I had students answer a number of questions, and then based on those questions, it gave them a numerative a number value. And then I placed them on this continuum. So right here in the middle would be your more moderate students. And over here on the left would be your more liberal students. And on the right, your more conservative students. Now this ideology was taken from, not from Cerritos, but Citrus. So would the demographic characteristics of that region be different from the demographic characteristics of Cerritos? And certainly early on, it was true. Now, Citrus has become more Hispanic. When I first started teaching there, it was more Caucasian. So did that change the outcome of this ideology survey? Yes. All right, so there it is. There it is. I hope this lecture has been helpful in having you answer the questions on those reading assignments that you do, and that you're doing well. As always, questions, email me. I also have those office hours. Feel free to join those, and I can help you out. All right, thanks, guys.